There is a photograph from my wedding day that I have never shown anyone. Not because it is unflattering, not because the lighting was wrong or someone blinked at the wrong moment, but because of what is in the background. My mother standing at the edge of the venue car park in a dress she had bought for the occasion, holding flowers she had brought without being asked, crying in the particular way of someone who has finally understood that a consequence has arrived and cannot be argued with. She had not been invited, she had come anyway, and she had stood outside those doors for 11 minutes before my aunt walked her gently back to her car. I know it was 11 minutes because my cousin timed it on her phone and texted me from outside while I was inside, just married, holding my husband's hand at the head of a table full of people who had chosen to be there rather than assumed they belonged. My name is Sarah Okafor. I am 31 years old. And this is the story of why my mother was not at my wedding, and why, after years of guilt and doubt and the slow accumulation of moments that each seemed small enough to absorb on their own, I have come to understand that the decision I made was not cruel. It was the first genuinely honest thing I had done for myself in a very long time. I want to begin somewhere specific, because this kind of story is easy to flatten, easy to make the mother a clean villain and the daughter a simple hero, and wrap everything in a tidy lesson about self-worth. That is not what this is. My mother is not a straightforward person, and neither is what happened between us over 31 years. But I will start with the morning of my 16th birthday, because that is the morning I first understood what kind of love my mother was capable of giving and where its edges were. I had applied in secret to a regional arts program, a Saturday painting class at a studio 40 minutes away, competitive, 12 students selected per year. I applied without telling her because I already knew, at 16, that telling her about things before they were settled gave her time to reshape them into something I no longer wanted. I received the acceptance letter on a Thursday. I hid it in the back of my desk drawer. I planned to tell her on Saturday morning, when the thing was already done and could not be undone. She found the letter on Friday evening while I was still at school. She did not congratulate me. She sat me down at the kitchen table and explained, in the measured voice she used when her mind was already decided, that the program was too far, that Saturdays were family time, and that the fact I had applied behind her back proved I had already known she would say no, which meant I had gone around her deliberately, which meant she could not fully trust me. The program started 3 weeks later. I was not in it. I tell this not to build a case or collect sympathy. I understand that one moment from a 16-year-old's life does not define a relationship. I tell it because it was the first time I clearly saw a pattern that would repeat itself, in different rooms and different circumstances, for the next 15 years. My mother's love came with a defined perimeter. Anything I wanted that existed outside that perimeter was treated not as my own desire, but as evidence that I was pulling away from her. By the time I met my husband James at 26, I had spent a decade learning to want things quietly. I had built a career in graphic design through freelance work I rarely talked about at home. I had friends my mother had never met. I had my own apartment, which I had moved into at 23 and furnished entirely alone, a fact she returned to often as proof of distance rather than independence. James was the kind of person who noticed things without making a performance of noticing them. He was patient and accurate about people, and within the first few months of meeting my mother, he had observed something I had long since stopped being able to see clearly from inside it. He brought it up on a Sunday evening, 8 months into our relationship, when I was trying to explain why I could not commit to a trip he wanted to plan because I was not certain my mother would be comfortable with the timing. He did not push or argue. He simply asked quietly when the last time was that I had made a significant decision without first calculating how she would respond to it. I sat with that question longer than I expected to. I could not answer it. And that inability was itself the answer. We got engaged 2 years later. He proposed in the kitchen of our apartment. No grand setting arranged, just him with a ring that had belonged to his grandmother, and his voice going slightly unsteady when he said my name. I said yes before he had finished asking. It was the easiest and most certain I had ever agreed to. The engagement was when the tension between my mother and me shifted from something I could manage quietly into something I could no longer navigate around without losing myself in the process. She had opinions about the venue, the date, the dress, the food, the ceremony length, and his family. Many mothers have opinions about their daughters' weddings, and I want to be fair about that. What was particular to mine was how those opinions arrived, not as suggestions offered and then released, but as corrections, each one carrying the implication that the choice I had made without her input was a choice made against her. She told me the venue was pretentious. She told me the dress made me look like I was performing a version of myself I had not earned. She told me the ceremony was too brief and the reception too informal. Then there was the dinner I arranged so that both families could meet. A restaurant, nothing elaborate, just a shared meal. My future mother-in-law Frances had made a genuine and warm effort. My mother had smiled through the whole evening and said very little, which I had taken as a good sign. 3 days later, James told me what she had said to Frances during a moment when the two of them had been standing alone near the end of the evening. She had told Frances that James had taken me away from my roots, that she was worried about what kind of daughter-in-law I would become, that she hoped Frances understood what she was bringing her son into. James had waited 3 days before deciding I needed to know. He was right that I did. I called my mother that same evening. I told her, clearly and without raising my voice, that what she had said was not acceptable, that I had heard it from James directly, not through rumor, that going to Frances with those concerns, rather than to me, the person she was supposedly worried about, was a deliberate choice, not a misunderstanding. She cried. She said she had only been expressing care. She said Frances had clearly misread her, and that the fact I was choosing to believe James's family over my own mother told her everything about where my loyalties had gone. She hung up before I finished speaking. She did not call back for 9 days. I made the decision 3 weeks before the wedding. Not in a moment of anger, not impulsively during a difficult call. I made it at my desk, late on a weeknight, after James had gone to sleep, with a piece of paper in front of me where I had been writing, over the course of several evenings, every specific incident I could recall clearly, not to construct a legal argument, just to stop allowing each moment to exist alone, separated from everything before and after it, which was how I had been managing them individually rather than understanding what they added up to together. When I read that paper from beginning to end, what I saw was not a mother who occasionally said hurtful things in moments of stress. It was 15 years of a pattern that had never once adjusted when I asked it to. Not after conversations, not after distance, not after I had tried, in every way I could think of, to tell her what I needed from her. I wrote her a letter and sent it by post rather than message, because I needed her to have time to sit with it before responding, and I needed time before whatever came back. The letter told her I loved her. That was true, and I needed it to be there. It told her I had spent years looking for a version of our relationship that felt safe and had not found it. It told her I needed my wedding day to be genuinely mine, not quietly managed, not shadowed by her feelings about my choices or his family. It told her this was not punishment. It was the only way I could imagine standing at the front of that room and feeling free in it. I said I hoped, when things had settled, that we could find a different way toward each other. Not me wamo me another down. She called my aunt, 2 cousins, a family friend I had not spoken to in 6 years, and apparently my father, who had been out of my life for over a decade but was apparently reachable for this particular situation. They called me one by one across the following days. Some were gentle about it. One told me I would regret this for the rest of my life. One said that whatever she had done, she was still my mother, and that had to count for something. I listened to all of them fully. I did not change my answer. James and I married on a Saturday in late October. 41 people, every one of them someone who had shown up for us in the ordinary, unglamorous ways that actually matter. People who had helped us move, who had sat with us through difficult seasons, who knew us as we genuinely were rather than as they needed us to be. Frances sat in the front row and cried the simple, uncomplicated kind of tears. My aunt was there, the same aunt who would, later that afternoon, walk my mother back to her car from the car park. She had known me my entire life and had, I think, understood more of what had been happening than I had ever given her credit for. I did not cry during the vows. I had expected to. Instead, I felt something settle in me, a steadiness I did not have a word for in the moment, like standing on ground that was actually solid, surrounded entirely by people who were there because they genuinely wanted to be. That feeling had not been manufactured or reasoned into. It arrived on its own. I recognized it immediately as something I had been moving toward for years without knowing its name. My mother and I began speaking again roughly 7 months after the wedding. She did not offer a direct apology, not in the form of a clear acknowledgement of what had happened and her part in it. But she wrote to me eventually a short, careful letter, and in it she said something I had genuinely never heard from her before, that she knew she had made things difficult and that she did not want to lose me completely. From her, that was a long way to travel. We speak now, carefully, occasionally. She has met James properly, as my husband, not as someone being assessed. She has seen some photographs from the wedding. She has not asked about the car park photograph, and I have not offered it. That image belongs to both of us differently, and I am not certain either of us is ready to look at it together yet. We are not the mother and daughter I spent years trying to build between us, but we are something honest, which is more than we ever managed when I was still trying to earn a version of her love that always seemed to be standing just ahead of where I could reach. I think often about the woman who sat at that desk with a cold cup of tea and wrote everything down. I think about what it cost her to read it as one story rather than 30 separate small ones. I think about the letter she posted and the weeks she waited and the Saturday in October when she stood at the front of a room and felt, for the first time, entirely and completely like herself. You can love someone and also know what they have cost you. You can want a real relationship with your mother and also need one day in your entire life that belongs to no one but you. That is not betrayal. That is simply knowing, finally and without apology, what you are worth. There is one more thing I want to say, because I think it is the part that people who have never been in this situation find the hardest to understand. Choosing not to invite my mother was not the end of loving her. It was not a declaration that nothing between us had ever been real, or that 31 years of a relationship counted for nothing. It was not even a statement that she was a bad person. People can cause real harm to the people they love most and still not be simply, categorically bad. My mother loved me in the only way she knew how. That way was not enough for me. Both of those things can be true at the same time. What I know now, that I did not know clearly enough before, is that protecting yourself from someone's way of loving you is not the same as rejecting love itself. It is, in fact, one of the most honest acts available to you, the decision to stop performing gratitude for something that was costing you more than it was giving. My wedding day was mine, completely. For the first time in my adult life, I stood in a room where no one was keeping score. That is what I wish for anyone reading this who recognizes something of their own story in mine. Not necessarily a wedding without a difficult parent. Not necessarily any single dramatic decision. Just one moment, one room, one day, one quiet evening at a desk with a piece of paper, where you let yourself see things as they actually are, rather than as you have spent years hoping they might become. That moment changes something. I cannot tell you exactly what or exactly how, only that it does.